Are you applying? The guard of the grand estate eyed the young woman from head to toe, his disbelief evident. Ma'am, we don't recruit models. You might have the wrong place. Her eyes widened before she quickly shook her head. No, I'm not mistaken. I'm here to apply, she insisted, her voice steady despite the growing nervousness in her chest. The guard frowned. To be a housekeeper? His gaze flicked to her elegant outfit. Designer labels, high-end accessories, not a single wrinkle in sight. Ma'am, just look at yourself. Those clothes cost more than my monthly salary. Why would someone like you want a maid's job? Panic bubbled within her as she suddenly realized her mistake. In her rush to escape, she had completely forgotten to change into something less conspicuous. She had barely arrived from Seattle when she discovered her family's shocking plan to marry her off. Without thinking, she had run. Mr. Guard, she stammered, forcing out a nervous laugh. These? Thrift store finds. You'd be surprised how much designer stuff people donate. Don't judge. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. Please, let me in before my parents track me down. I'm not ready to get married. The guard crossed his arms. Even if I believe that, where's your resume? We don't just let random people in. Her stomach sank. She scratched her head, scrambling for an excuse. This is kind of on impulse, Mr. Guard. I don't have a resume because, well, we're really poor. No computer, no printer, nothing. Then leave, ma'am. Come on, Mr. Guard, have a heart, she pleaded, desperation creeping into her tone. I haven't eaten, I have no home, and I swear I can do it all. Laundry, cooking, cleaning, driving, you name it, I can handle it. If your boss is a nightmare, I'll still stick around. I've got patience, I promise. She was seconds away from dropping to her knees when a sudden voice cut through the air. What's going on here, Mr. Ten? The sharp but composed voice belonged to an elderly woman with striking white hair. The moment she appeared, the guard straightened. Mom. Olivia, the guard addressed her with respect. This young lady just showed up out of nowhere. She says she wants to work as Mr. Santiago's housekeeper. The woman turned her piercing gaze onto the girl, taking in her presence with quiet scrutiny. You're applying? The young woman lifted her chin, refusing to let her nerves show. Yes, ma'am. I don't have a resume, but I need this job. The older woman inhaled deeply, then, without another word, reached for the gate and swung it wide open. The guard's mouth fell open. All right, come in, she said, turning on her heel and walking inside. The young woman hesitated for just a second before hurrying after her. As she passed the stunned guard, she couldn't resist shooting him a triumphant look before slipping through the gates, trailing behind the older woman into the unknown. We're not hiring anyone new, the older woman said bluntly, as they both settled onto small, rickety chairs inside a cramped, sweltering room. Beads of sweat gathered at her temple, but her sharp gaze never wavered. Every month housekeepers quit because they can't stand our boss's personality. She studied the young woman carefully. Are you sure you want to take this on? Without hesitation, the applicant nodded. Yes, I'm sure. The older woman gave her a sideways glance, her eyes lingering on the expensive-looking fabric draping over the girl's frame. From the look of your clothes, you don't seem to be struggling. I'm broke, the younger woman countered quickly, absent-mindedly running her fingers over the hem of her shirt. This came from a thrift shop. The seller said it belonged to a wealthy woman who passed away recently. An eyebrow arched. You're not making that up, are you? She shook her head firmly. No, ma'am. If I had money, I wouldn't be here applying for a housekeeper position. The older woman narrowed her eyes, her expression skeptical. Maybe you're my boss's ex-girlfriend trying to get back with him. Last month, his ex pretended to be a maid just to sneak inside. The moment she got in, she practically threw herself at him while he was peacefully sleeping. Poor boss. The younger woman stifled a laugh, shaking her head. I can promise you, ma'am, I'm not his ex or some jilted fling. She tossed her hair over her shoulder with a playful smirk. Honestly, I'm way too gorgeous to be anyone's ex. Then, in a more serious tone, she added, and I don't even know him, so please, hire me. You won't regret it. Honestly, I'm desperate. She wiped at the sweat forming on her brow, her determination unwavering. The older woman folded her arms, considering. Fine. What can you do to convince us to hire you? Straightening her posture, the young woman confidently listed, I can wash clothes, clean, cook. That's standard for a maid, the older woman interrupted flatly. Tell me something else." The applicant leaned forward, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Well, in addition to having a ton of patience, I can drive, something most housekeepers can't do," she grinned. "Sure, I did get into an accident last year and wrecked 3 cars because of a faulty tire. But I promise, I've improved. I'm confident I won't crash into anything else, especially since it won't be my car." She winked. "I'll take really good care of it." The older woman blinked, momentarily speechless. "Are you serious?" The younger woman flashed a bright, unwavering smile. "Yes, ma'am. I'm a good driver." Silence stretched between them for a second before the older woman let out a resigned sigh. "Then you're hired." The young woman's eyes widened in disbelief. She jumped to her feet. "Really?" The woman with the white hair gave a firm nod. "Oh my gosh, thank you so much." The young woman exhaled in relief, pressing her hands together as if in silent gratitude. "This is perfect. If I'm just a maid, my family and my fiancé's family will never think to look for me here," she muttered under her breath. Then, as the reality of her new role sank in, she perked up. "Wait, what areas will I be cleaning?" "You won't be cleaning," the older woman corrected flatly. Her bright smile faltered. "I won't?" "No. You'll be my boss's personal driver." The younger woman froze. "Wait, what?" She let out a nervous chuckle. "That was just a joke. You're kidding, right?" The older woman's expression remained unreadable. "You said you were a good driver, didn't you?" "Well, yeah, but..." "Then you'll be Mr. Santiago's personal driver. You've got patience, and that's exactly what we need. Hopefully, you'll last longer than the others." With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving the young woman sitting there in stunned silence. So long, she slumped back down onto the chair, pressing her forehead against her palm. A personal driver? That hadn't been part of the plan. Her thoughts were interrupted when the older woman returned, finding her still lingering in the hallway. "Miss, are you really going through with this?" She straightened, nodding. "Yes, I am. I know it's unusual, but..." "All right," the woman cut in, already moving forward. "Follow me." They stepped into an opulent living room, its grand chandelier casting a golden glow across polished floors and intricately carved furniture. It was the kind of wealth she had only ever seen in magazines, pristine, elegant, and impossibly untouchable. The older woman came to a stop and turned. "So, are you absolutely certain you can handle more than just driving? You'll also be running errands and helping with other tasks around the house?" She nodded without hesitation. "Yes, ma'am, I'll do whatever you need." "Excuse me, are you the new hire?" A different maid approached, giving her a once-over, her expression a mix of curiosity and amusement. The young woman straightened her shoulders. "Yes, I am, starting today." The maid smirked, tilting her head slightly. "Ha, good luck." Then, with a knowing glint in her eye, she added, "Just don't say we didn't warn you if you end up running out of here screaming." Before the new hire could respond, the maid was already walking away, leaving her blinking in confusion. Later she found herself outside again, face to face with the guard at the entrance. He crossed his arms, his previous hostility now replaced with begrudging suspicion. "Where's your resume?" She bit her lip. "I told you, I don't have one." "How do we know you're qualified?" the guard challenged, arms crossed. The young woman met his gaze with unwavering confidence. "I can show you." Before the guard could scoff or throw another objection her way, the older woman with the white hair reappeared, her tone sharp and final. "That's enough, Mr. 10, she snapped. "She's been hired, deal with it." The guard clamped his mouth shut, though his eyes still held doubt. The new hire, taking full advantage of the moment, stuck her tongue out at him the second the older woman turned her back. The next morning, dressed in casual jeans and a plain shirt, another thrift store find, she braced herself for her first day. With her nerves tingling, she approached the older woman. "Ma'am Olivia," she ventured carefully, "do I start cleaning now?" "You're the personal driver," Olivia reminded her, raising a skeptical eyebrow. "Oh, right," she mumbled, laughing nervously as she recalled the very role she had so hastily agreed to the day before. Olivia placed 2 keys in her hand, one for the house, the other, unmistakably, for a car. "This is for the vehicle," she explained briskly. "Hurry, our boss needs to leave for the company. You'll also be handling any other tasks he requires." The young woman swallowed hard. Understood," she managed to say, before making a beeline for the front yard. There, parked in pristine condition, was a sleek black car, polished to perfection. She hesitated for a moment, taking in its intimidating presence, then squared her shoulders and reached for the driver's door. After setting her bag down inside, she moved to open the back door. Seated in the rear was a man in a fitted suit, his face partially obscured by dark sunglasses. He exuded an air of effortless power, his posture relaxed yet imposing. Even without looking directly at her, his tightly knit brows and the scowl etched across his face sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. She cleared her throat, willing her voice to stay steady. "Sir, I'm Isabella Carter-Ilara, your new driver." "I don't care," he cut her off coldly, his tone devoid of interest. "Just drive." Her fingers tensed around the key as she inhaled deeply, steadying herself before slipping it into the ignition. "Faster," he snapped impatiently. "I don't want to be late." "Just a moment, sir," she stammered, fumbling with the controls as her pulse quickened. "Faster." Panic surged through her veins. In her haste, she slammed her foot onto the gas pedal with too much force. The car lurched forward violently, tires screeching against the pavement, before ramming straight into the iron gate with a resounding thud. The sudden impact nearly sent her flying into the steering wheel. Her breath hitched, her heart hammering in her chest. She spun around in alarm, her wide eyes darting toward the back seat. MCS Santiago had grabbed his forehead, his sleek sunglasses slipping off from the force of the jolt. His expression darkened like an impending storm. "Sir, I'm so sorry," she stammered, her voice frantic. "I didn't mean to." His jaw clenched, his teeth grinding audibly. "What do you mean you're sorry?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You just crashed my brand new car. How could you be this reckless?" She swallowed hard, her pulse a chaotic rhythm in her ears. I swear it was an accident, sir. Please, don't worry. I'll pay for the damage." "Pay for it?" His incredulous laugh was laced with fury. "You think you can afford to fix this?" His voice rose, his patience unraveling. "You're useless. You could have—" "I'm not a killer, sir." She cut in desperately, her face flushing with embarrassment. "And I'm sure the damage isn't that bad." A sharp knock on the driver's side window made her jump. She turned to see Olivia, the woman with the white hair, staring her down with barely contained rage. The window rolled down with an almost ominous slowness. "What happened here?" Olivia's voice was tight with anger. "Are you trying to get Mr. Santiago killed? The front of the car is wrecked. I thought you said you could drive." From the back seat, Mr. Santiago scoffed. "And now, thanks to her, I'm going to be late." His words were clipped, seething with irritation. "This is completely unacceptable." The young woman's stomach twisted. I panicked. I didn't mean to," she whimpered, her fingers clutching the steering wheel like a lifeline. "Get out," he barked. She froze. "Yes, sir." "Get out." His voice was sharper this time, slicing through the air like a blade. "You're fired. Get rid of her." Before she could even process his words, Olivia yanked the car door open and unceremoniously pulled her out. "Ouch! Don't touch me," she snapped, instinctively yanking her arm away. The reaction seemed to surprise Olivia, who blinked at her in shock. Then, in an instant, the older woman schooled her features, forcing a polite, albeit strained, smile, as she clasped her hands together in mock patience. Meanwhile, another staff member carefully guided the blindfolded, or rather sunglasses-wearing, boss out of the damaged car. The way they maneuvered him suggested they were quite experienced in assisting him, moving with practiced ease despite his obvious fury. "Whoever crashed my car, I never want her as my driver again," he thundered. "Kick her out." The words sent a jolt of panic through the new maid. Without thinking, she rushed forward and instinctively grabbed his arm, her fingers tightening in desperation. Gasps echoed around her. The boss stiffened at the sudden contact, as did the staff around them. "Sir, please don't fire me," she pleaded, her voice laced with urgency. "I have nowhere else to go. I swear, when I have the money, I'll replace your car with a brand new one." A snort of disbelief came from one of the other maids, and the younger woman shot her a sharp glare before turning back to her boss. "Yes, I'll pay you back, sir, whether through my work or however else you want." She pressed on, her grip tightening slightly before she quickly withdrew her hand, realizing how bold she was being. "Even if you work me to the bone, I won't complain. Just, don't throw me out." A heavy silence fell over the staff. It was as though they had never witnessed someone beg to stay before. Usually employees quit of their own accord, often fleeing at the first opportunity. Realizing that, a sudden thought struck her. "Sir, I promise, I won't abandon you," she declared, her voice unwavering. "I'll stay, no matter what." For the first time, her boss faltered. His lips parted slightly, and for a fleeting second he seemed at a loss for words. Then, with a sharp jerk, he wrenched his arm away. "Don't touch me," he snapped, as if shaking off a lingering sensation. "Miss Olivia, take me inside. Cancel my meeting. I'm already late and I refuse to be unprofessional." Without another glance at the new maid, he allowed Miss Olivia, the white-hailed woman, to lead him away, his shoulders still tense with irritation. As soon as they disappeared inside, Olivia turned back to the young woman. "Well," she said, crossing her arms, "it looks like he's giving you another chance." The maid's shoulders sagged in relief. "So, I can stay?" "Yes, but don't think you're off the hook," Olivia warned. "You'll still have to pay for the damage. That means deductions from your salary." "That's fine," she said quickly, nodding. "As long as I get food and a place to stay, at least that way I won't be found by—" She hesitated before muttering, "our families." Olivia studied her for a moment, then gave a grim nod. "Then put these on." She thrust a folded garment into the young woman's hands. Curious, the maid unfolded it, only to find herself staring at a neatly pressed housekeeper's uniform. Her jaw nearly dropped. She lifted her gaze, bewilderment flashing across her face. "Wait, so I'm not getting fired?" "He was impressed, I suppose, by that speech you made about not abandoning him," Miss Olivia remarked, her sharp gaze assessing the younger maid. "But don't think for a second that you're off the hook. You still have to pay for the car you wrecked. It'll be deducted from your paycheck." "That's fine," the younger woman said without hesitation. "As long as I get meals and—" She paused, lowering her voice. "Alexander won't find me." Miss Olivia gave her a pointed look but didn't press the matter. Instead, she shoved a neatly folded uniform into her hands. "Then put that on and go serve Mr. Santiago," she ordered before turning on her heel and striding away, leaving the new maid alone with the garment clutched to her chest. With a deep breath, she hurried to the room that had been assigned to her. The sheer size of the house continued to astound her. It was far grander than she had expected, even larger than her own family estate. Does he really live here alone, she wondered? Where are his parents, his relatives? There was no time to dwell on the thought. She reached her boss's bedroom door and knocked lightly. "Sir?" she called before cautiously pushing it open. The next second she screamed, slapping her hands over her eyes. "Oh my gosh!" A sharp intake of breath from across the room confirmed what she shouldn't have seen. There, in the middle of the room, stood Mr. Santiago, halfway through changing. His slacks had been discarded, and at that exact moment, his boxers, or briefs, had slipped to the floor, leaving his firm, pale backside completely exposed. Her brain short-circuited. Had he forgotten to put on underwear, or had he simply overlooked it because of his condition? His voice cut through the silence with eerie calm. "I can't see you," he said flatly, "so I have no idea whether you actually saw anything or not." She nervously lowered her hands from her face, her mouth moving faster than her brain. "No, sir, I didn't see a thing. I had no idea you were changing. I definitely did not see that you weren't wearing briefs." He sighed. "That's actually why I called you in here." She blinked. "What?" "I can't find my underwear," he said matter-of-factly. "I can't see. I need help." Her throat went dry. "Sure, sir, where should I look?" she stammered, forcing her gaze anywhere but in his direction. "Try the closet," he instructed. Grateful for the excuse to not look at him, she all but bolted to the closet. A quick scan of the neatly organized shelves revealed a Calvin Klein brief folded and placed to the side. She grabbed it and turned back, keeping her eyes carefully trained on the floor. Thankfully, by then he had somewhat saved her from further mortification. He was now sitting on the edge of the bed, a pillow draped over his lap in a way that told her he was at least aware of how awkward this was. She swallowed hard, inhaled shakily, and held out the brief at arm's length. "Here it is, sir," she said quickly. "I'll just step out so you can change." "No," he snapped, making her jump. "Stay here. I might put it on backward and I need you to check." Her brain stuttered to a halt. "What?" she blurted, her face heating up instantly. "Check? I mean, that's not… backward, oh gosh." She flailed for coherent words, but they slipped right through her fingers like sand.
She mentally kicked herself. Calm down. She had already wrecked his car, and now, apparently, she was auditioning for an even more mortifying task. How had her life gone from escaping her past to this? Her pulse hammered in her ears as he exhaled impatiently. "Just stay where you are. Don't look," he repeated. "After I put it on, tell me if it's backward or not, okay?" Her body stiffened with sheer mortification, but she spun around as fast as humanly possible to give him privacy. How is this my life? Normally, a man would have another man help him with things like this, especially if he couldn't see. Then again, what if she accidentally made him wear like a Barbie t-shirt? He wouldn't know, right? The ridiculous thought nearly made her roll her eyes. Or worse, what if he was some kind of maniac who'd use his blindness as an excuse to mess with her? Her thoughts screeched to a halt. Actually, if anything, he was probably more at risk of her teasing him, but she wasn't that type of woman. She sighed. Deep breaths. "I'm done," he announced. "Check if I'm wearing it right." She swallowed hard and turned around, bracing herself, and immediately gasped. "Sir, it's backward," she squeaked, slapping a hand over her eyes again. He stiffened. "What? It's backward, sir," she stammered, blindly gesturing in his direction. "Please take it off again and put it on correctly." A beat of silence, then, "Damn," he muttered. She peeked between her fingers just in time to see him turn away. Sir, where are you going?" she asked, her voice pitching slightly higher with concern. "Bathroom," he said irritably, already striding toward the door. Her stomach dropped as she noticed something critical. He was heading in the wrong direction. "Sir, that's not…" She didn't even get to finish before, bang! He walked straight into the wall near the bathroom entrance. She winced as he stumbled back, a hand flying to his forehead. "Ouch," he muttered, blinking in dazed confusion. "Help me." Her heart clenched. Something inside her twisted, not with amusement, but with genuine sympathy. For the first time since meeting him, she saw past the intimidating presence, the scowl, the sharp commands. How unfortunate. He seemed to have everything: wealth, looks, power. But being blind overshadowed it all. What did money mean if you couldn't even see where you were going? Maybe there was hope for a surgery or something, but at that moment, none of that mattered. Right now, all she felt was sorry for him, because no matter how rich he was still lost in the dark. "From now on, you're not just his personal driver," Miss Olivia announced a few days later, her sharp gaze locking onto the young maid. "You're also his personal maid. Our previous one quit yesterday." The words caught her off guard. She paused mid-bite, her spoon hovering inches from her lips. "Personal maid?" she echoed, blinking in surprise. "Yes," Miss Olivia confirmed, arms crossed. "You'll be assigned only to him. No more cleaning the entire house, just his room and office. Your job is to give him your full attention and assist him with anything he needs." Her mind whirled. "So basically, I have to shadow him everywhere because he's blind?" Miss Olivia nodded. "Yes, otherwise he might get hurt. Are you complaining?" "No," she blurted, straightening. "Just clarifying." The older woman exhaled, watching her with an expression that was both calculating and skeptical. If you want to stay here long term, do your job well, she warned. Mr. Santiago won't be blind forever. That's what I believe. You're the 11th personal maid we've hired for him. All the others quit. They couldn't handle his attitude. She tilted her head slightly. 11? Miss Olivia's gaze sharpened. Yet you had the nerve to beg to stay, she smirked faintly. We'll see how long you last. Maybe in a week, you'll be the one begging to quit. The young maid clenched her jaw. I won't leave, she said firmly. Miss Olivia merely gave a knowing hum, turning away. We'll see. And with that, she strode off, leaving her alone at the table. She exhaled slowly. Leave? Why would she leave? Sure, her new boss had a terrible personality, but compared to Alexander's foul breath and suffocating presence, this was paradise. She would much rather put up with a grumpy blind man than marry someone she didn't love. After finishing her meal, she went to prepare Mr. Santiago's clothes for the next day. Despite only being in the house for a week, she had adapted quickly. Maybe it was because she had spent so much of her life moving around, never truly settling anywhere. She was used to adjusting. She knocked 3 times before stepping into his room. The air inside was cool, the lighting dim. His bed was empty, meaning she had a few moments to move freely. As she laid out his outfit, something caught her eye. An ID card. Curious, she picked it up and read the name printed on it. Julian Santiago. She whispered the name under her breath, her lips curling into a soft smile as she studied the photo. Julian Santiago. The man in the picture was smiling, a genuine, unguarded smile that made his entire face light up. His eyes were still intact back then, full of life and certainty. He looked so effortlessly handsome. He never smiles like this anymore. A pang of sadness flickered through her. She was about to return the ID to the drawer when something else caught her eye. A shattered picture frame. Her fingers hesitated over it, curiosity tightening in her chest before she finally picked it up. Through the cracked glass, a young woman smiled back at her, clutching a bouquet of flowers. Who is she? The maid traced the delicate features frozen in time. Was she Mr. Santiago's girlfriend? If so, where was she now? Why had she never come to visit? Before she could dwell on it further, a voice interrupted her thoughts. Deep. Cold. You still haven't found that person? Her breath hitched Julian. She hurriedly placed the frame back and turned, spotting him standing by the balcony, phone pressed to his ear. The dim lighting cast sharp shadows over his features, making his expression unreadable. I need them found immediately, he continued, his tone laced with quiet fury. I won't sleep well until we track down the jerk who hit our car 3 months ago. Because of that idiot, I lost my sight. His voice dropped slightly, carrying something more fragile beneath the anger. And the girl I love, her stomach twisted. That woman in the photo. Julian's hand curled into a fist. Do your job, Darwin. With that, he ended the call. Isabella swallowed hard. She had to leave. Now she turned on her heel, moving as quietly as possible to slip away without disturbing him. But Isabella Carter. She froze. His voice was firm, controlled. Sir, she stammered. I was just getting your clothes ready for tomorrow. A beat of silence. Come here. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Still, she obeyed, stepping forward cautiously. Yes, sir? He wasn't looking at her. He couldn't. But he faced the curtains, as if staring into the night beyond them. Sleep in my room tonight. She nearly choked on air. What? Her pulse skyrocketed, panic flashing in her eyes. Was he serious? Was this some twisted joke? Good grief. What was he trying to do? Just as she was about to protest, he suddenly burst into laughter. The rich, unexpected sound sent a shiver down her spine, and for a split second, she forgot how to breathe. Because Julian Santiago, Stern, scowling, impossible Julian Santiago was laughing. It was a deep, unguarded laugh so different from his usual cold demeanor. It softened the harsh lines of his face, making him almost unrecognizable. And for the first time since she'd met him, she realized something. He's devastatingly handsome when he smiles. That's not what I meant, he said once his laughter faded, his voice settling back into its usual firm tone. I want you to bring a cot in here. You can sleep anywhere in this room. I need you close by in case I need something. Got it? She blinked, momentarily stunned, then her face lit up. Really? I can sleep here? She asked, excitement creeping into her voice. Yes! Oh my gosh, she blurted out, bouncing on her heels in sheer delight. Thank you, sir. For the past week, I've been stuck in the hottest, stuffiest room ever. Finally, some real air conditioning. He grimaced. Why are you talking like that? Sorry, sir. I, uh... She hesitated, scrambling for an explanation. Even if I'm just a broke girl, I'm used to a bit of comfort, she admitted nervously, hoping he wouldn't read too much into her words. The last thing she needed was for him to suspect her real identity or why she was hiding. She flinched at the slight edge in his tone and scurried out of the room. A few minutes later, she returned, arms weighed down with a folded mattress and a blanket. She could barely contain her elation at the thought of finally sleeping somewhere comfortable again, a taste of the life she had once known. As she spread the mattress out near the sitting area, she glanced toward his massive bed, where he lay stretched out, silent. Mr. Santiago, what will I do tomorrow? She asked, settling in. Besides preparing my clothes, guiding me to the bathroom, and cleaning my room, he finished for her. I suppose I won't be needing your driving skills anytime soon since you destroyed my car, she winced. Oof, yeah, I'm really sorry about that, sir. He shrugged as if it no longer mattered. You'll do my laundry, cook my meals, and he paused briefly. Deal with my personality. She blinked at that last part. He exhaled slowly, almost as if weary. Just don't leave. That's all I need. Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. Does he hate being left behind? Okay, sir, she said softly. Silence settled between them, stretching long enough that she thought he had already fallen asleep. Then, in the quiet, his voice came again, quieter this time. When my eyes are finally operated on, if I can see again, and you haven't abandoned me yet. I'll give you a reward, he murmured. She blinked, caught off guard. A reward? She echoed. He nodded faintly. What do you want? She hesitated, unsure how to answer. What did she truly want? Freedom. That was the first word that came to mind. She had been running from an arranged marriage, desperately avoiding the fate her family had forced upon her. Maybe that was it. Maybe all she wanted was to be free, to escape her fiancé, to never look back. But instead, she said, I want my freedom. Silence stretched between them. On her cot, she peered at him. He lay on his bed, his face turned away as if lost in thought. You, sir, she started hesitantly. Besides wanting to see again, is there anything else you want? A long pause. Then, finally, he spoke. Just like you, he murmured. I want to marry the person I really love. Her thoughts immediately flickered to the shattered photo frame in his drawer. Is she the woman in that picture frame, sir? She asked cautiously. Your girlfriend? His posture stiffened. You went through my stuff? His voice turned sharp. No, sir. I just saw the frame, she hurriedly assured him. He exhaled heavily. She was my girlfriend, he said bitterly. She left me when I lost my sight, couldn't accept that I might never see again. She frowned, shaking her head. Then she never really loved you. His brows knit together. What? If someone truly cares about you, they'll stay, even if you go blind, lose a limb, or have other struggles, she said firmly. Love doesn't disappear because of that. And he didn't respond right away. Perhaps no one had ever said that to him before. Perhaps it had been easier for him to believe that love was conditional, that no one would stay when things got difficult. She softened her tone. Anyway, hang in there, sir. I believe you'll see the world again. 2 months passed. She never imagined she'd last this long without breaking down or running away. Even Miss Olivia, ever skeptical, had stopped waiting for her to quit. Isabella Carter, fix my necktie, Mr. Santiago ordered one morning. She hurried to his side with a small, knowing smile. I already showed you how to do it yourself, sir, she teased, reaching up to straighten the tie. I can't see, he snapped. Why do you keep teaching me things you know I can't look at? She exhaled softly. Because I'm not treating you like a blind man, sir. He stilled. What? She shrugged. I notice that when people treat you differently because you're blind, you get annoyed. So I do the opposite. I explain things to you like I would to anyone else. You just have to remember them. As she adjusted his tie, he suddenly lifted a hand, and she froze as his palm landed squarely on her chest. What the... Is this your cheek? He asked innocently. Her entire face erupted in flames. She immediately slapped his hand away. Sir, that's my chest. She watched in astonishment as his ears and neck flushed red. Sorry, he stammered. I didn't know She sighed, grabbing his hand and gently guiding it to her cheek instead. Here, that's my cheek. His lips parted slightly, his fingers tentatively exploring her face. His touch was feather-light, tracing over her features as if committing them to memory. I want to memorize what you look like, he murmured. So even if I can't see right now, I can still see you in my mind. Her breath hitched. His fingertips traveled across her nose, her forehead, then down to her lips. A shiver ran through her, her heart pounding wildly. You have a small face, he mused, a pointed nose, and His voice dipped lower. The kissable lips. I can imagine you now. Heat flared in her cheeks. She quickly turned away, reaching for some styling gel to smooth his hair. Well, I hope I'm pretty in your imagination, she joked lightly, trying to shake off the sudden tension. And not hideous. He tilted his head slightly. You're beautiful in my imagination. A soft laugh escaped her, and she resumed combing his hair. That's good, then we'll get along just fine. Later that day, they visited his doctor for another checkup. Despite Miss Olivia offering to call the doctor to the house, Mr. Santiago insisted on traveling to the clinic. He claimed he didn't want to be treated like an invalid, but all she could think about was how exhausting it was for him. The entire time, she worried he might trip or bump into something. Thankfully, she wasn't the one driving this time. After the accident, Miss Olivia had arranged for a professional driver. When they arrived at the clinic, the doctor greeted them with a friendly smile. So, you must be the new maid, he said, his gaze sweeping over her curiously. Yes, sir, she replied brightly. The doctor was handsome. There was no denying that. But even in his blindness, Mr. Santiago still held a certain allure that no one else could match. You're so pretty, the doctor blurted out before he could stop himself. She blinked, then laughed as a warm blush crept up her cheeks. Hey, she teased, you think maids can't be pretty? His eyes widened in alarm. No, I didn't mean, she cut him off with a playful grin. I'm kidding, Doc. Now please focus on my boss before he loses his patience. Indeed, Mr. Santiago's frown had deepened. Right? The doctor said quickly. Come on, Mr. Santiago. I'll step outside, she offered, wanting to give them privacy. She wandered into the hospital courtyard, relishing the fresh air and the brief moment of solitude. So far, no one from her old life had found her. No phone meant no updates, no news about Alexander, her family, or the wedding she was running from. For now, being a maid in Mr. Santiago's home seemed to be the perfect disguise. But then, excuse me, ma'am, have you seen a tall woman with long hair, small face, goes by the name Isabella Carter? Her breath caught. The voice came from a man wearing sunglasses speaking to a woman on a nearby bench. Her pulse skyrocketed. Was he looking for her? From her hiding spot behind a column, she risked a peek. His face seemed vaguely familiar, but she couldn't afford to stand around and figure out why. Without hesitation, she turned on her heel and rushed back inside, her mind racing. She needed to disappear. Fast. A stray wheelchair sat abandoned near the hallway. Perfect. She plopped down into it, slumped her body, and shut her eyes, feigning sleep. Just as she did, she heard the footsteps. "Hey, have you seen a woman with—" The man's voice was closer now. A nurse replied, "I think I saw her running that way like a crazy person." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Please, just go away." The footsteps stopped. She could feel someone hovering. "Ma'am, ma'am." She remained motionless as he nudged her lightly. Then, "Why are you harassing a sleeping patient boy?" An old lady's sharp voice cut through the air. She nearly sighed in relief. "Sorry, ma'am. I'll ask someone else," the man stammered before retreating. Only when his footsteps disappeared down the hall did she finally exhale, her entire body sagging with relief. That was way too close. "Grandma, who's in my wheelchair?" A small voice trembled with distress. Startled, she jumped up, turning to find a teary-eyed little boy clutching a stuffed toy, his lip quivering. I'm so sorry," she blurted, hastily vacating the seat. "I was just resting." The boy sniffled, pressing himself against his grandmother's side. "Grandma, she stole my wheelchair." Heat rushed to her face. I'm really sorry," she repeated, bowing slightly before dashing back inside, mortified. By the time she reached Mr. Santiago and the doctor, she was slightly out of breath, beads of sweat gathering on her brow. The doctor's eyes widened. "What happened to your hair?" Only then did she register their stares. She reached up, fingers brushing over the freshly chopped strands. "Oh, this?" She forced a casual shrug. "I stepped out to get it cut, but the barber must have been in a rush. It's kinda uneven, but I'm still cute." She attempted a confident grin. The doctor cleared his throat. "Right. Anyway, Mr. Santiago, the next time we meet, we'll be scheduling your eye surgery." His voice turned warm, hopeful. "I'm excited for you. You'll see the world again soon." Her head snapped toward him. "Really, Doc?" "Next month," he confirmed. "Hopefully you'll still be around then. It'll be good for him to have you by his side." She grinned, flashing a thumbs up, but beside her, Mr. Santiago's expression darkened. "Doc," he said flatly, "are you excited about my surgery or just excited to see my maid again?" A flush crept up her neck. The doctor let out a nervous chuckle. "Let's not keep you any longer, Mr. Santiago." "Let's go, Isabella Carter," her boss ordered. She quickly assisted him, sneaking the doctor an apologetic glance before guiding Mr. Santiago out. The car ride home was unusually quiet. Monsieur Santiago sat still, seemingly lost in thought. His face was unreadable, his fingers absently tapping against his knee. After a long pause, she finally broke the silence. "Sir, may I ask something?" He didn't respond, but she took his silence as permission to continue. "When you can see again, what's the first thing you want to look at?" That caught his attention. He didn't speak right away, his fingers still tapping idly against his knee. She bit her lip. "I was just curious." Instead of answering, he changed the subject. "Why did you cut your hair?" She forced a casual shrug. "Change of style. I just felt like it." He scoffed. "Now I can't imagine you anymore." His voice held a tinge of irritation. "I got used to picturing you a certain way." She rolled her eyes. "That's it. Give me your hand." Before he could protest, she took his hand and guided it to her cheek. "Feel me all over again so you can memorize me." She heard him swallow. Even though he couldn't see, she could feel the intensity of his focus. For a moment, she allowed herself to admire him. His sharp jawline, the strong angles of his face, the way his dark hair framed his features. He had the striking presence of someone who could steal hearts effortlessly, if not for his cold, infuriating personality. Whoever he loves is lucky. Her gaze lingered, and a strange thought surfaced. This woman he loves, she's so fortunate. Are you done staring at me? His sudden words made her jolt. You know I can sense it, even if I can't see. Her face heated. Sorry, she mumbled. She hurried to change the subject. Anyway, sir, you never answered my question. Silence. Then he tilted his face toward her, his voice dropping to a low murmur. You asked what I want to see first. Her breath hitched. The answer is you. Her eyes widened as he leaned in. Don't move, he whispered. And then his lips brushed hers, a soft, fleeting touch. Her heart slammed against her ribs, breath catching in her throat. Had Mr. Santiago just kissed her? Shock jolted through her. He had stolen her first kiss. Isabella Carter couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the kiss over and over. Julian Santiago had kissed her, and not just any kiss. Her first kiss. At least it had been him, she thought, not Alexander. Still, the memory left her jittery, her heart refusing to settle. Why had he kissed her? Did he like her? She hadn't done anything to seduce him. Had she? Her thoughts spiraled, refusing to quiet down. Eventually, unable to stand the restless energy coiling inside her, she slipped into the bathroom for a late-night shower. The warm water did little to calm her racing mind. She scrubbed her face repeatedly, as if she could wash away the blush that kept creeping up her cheeks. I can't be developing feelings for Julian. The very idea was dangerous. She was here to stay hidden. Falling for him would only complicate things. She shook her head, rinsing the soap from her arms. Except, nothing happened. Frowning, she turned the faucet again. Nothing. Oh, no water, she murmured, her body still covered in suds. Panic set in. She was stark naked and dripping with soap, and everyone else was probably asleep. What could help her now? With no other choice, she wrapped herself in a towel, gripping it tightly as she tiptoed out of the bathroom, her skin sticky with soap and shampoo. She spotted Julian standing by the window, still awake, her face burned. Oh, this is mortifying. Sir, she called softly. He turned his head. She cleared her throat. Julian, may I use your bathroom? Ours has no water, and I'm halfway through my shower. His response was immediate. Come here. Her breath caught. She frantically shook her head. I'm soaking wet, and I only have this towel, she stammered. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency. His expression remained unreadable. Go on, be quick, he said. Relief flooded her. Thank you, sir. She hurried past him, clutching the towel as if her life depended on it. Just as she reached his bathroom, his voice stopped her. Afterward, I have something I need you to do. She swallowed. Yes, sir. Isabella rushed into his bathroom, closing the door behind her as she exhaled in relief. She showered in record time, scrubbing away the lingering embarrassment of having to ask Julian for help. By the time she stepped out, her hair was still damp, clinging to her shoulders as she ran a comb through it. Julian was waiting in the bedroom, his expression unreadable. What did you want me to do, Sir Julian? She asked, hesitating slightly over his name. Pack my things. We're going on a vacation tomorrow. Her hand froze mid-calm. A vacation? She echoed, her voice tightening. Where? Esperanza, he said simply. The color drained from her face. Her grip on the comb slackened. Esperanza, the very place she had been running from. That was where her family lived. That was where Alexander was, Julian continued, unaware of her turmoil. I own a rest house there. I need to clear my mind. You'll come with me? Her stomach twisted. Can I just stay here? She asked, trying to sound casual. His tone left no room for negotiation. You're coming with me. Her heart pounded. He couldn't take her back there. If anyone recognized her, it was over. Julian frowned. Why? What's wrong? Why don't you want to go? His voice softened as if sensing her hesitation. Tell me, Isabella. I won't go if you give me a reason. Her throat tightened. She scrambled for an excuse. It's just not a nice place, sir. It's boring there, she lied, biting her lip. It's really better if you go somewhere else. Anywhere else, please. Silence stretched between them. Then let's go on a date tomorrow, Julian declared. Her jaw nearly hit the floor. A date? She stammered. But I'm your personal maid, sir. Julian, it doesn't matter, he cut her off smoothly. We're going on a date, wear whatever you like. I can't see you anyway. A pang shot through her chest at those words. Without thinking, she stepped closer, reaching out to cup his cheek. His skin was warm beneath her palm, and she felt him stiffen slightly at the unexpected contact. You'll be able to see again, Julian, she whispered. You'll see the world once more. You'll even see your annoying maid. She forced a teasing lilt into her voice, hoping to lighten the moment. His hand rose, covering hers. Her breath caught. I want to see you, Isabella, he murmured, his voice quiet yet resolute. I can't wait to see your beautiful face. She smiled, warmth spreading through her chest like a gentle flame. Of course you will, once you can see again. I'll even take you to Esperanza, she teased, just so you can witness how lousy that place is. Julian didn't respond. Instead, his grip on her hand tightened, just as she tried to pull away. Isabella, he murmured, hairbreadth hitched. Yes, sir? What did you think about our kiss earlier? His voice was low, intimate. Did you like it? Her eyes widened, heat rushing to her cheeks. Before she could stammer out a reply, he continued. I'd like to kiss you again, he admitted, his tone dropping to a husky whisper. Is that illegal? Do you have a boyfriend? She swallowed hard. I don't have one. Then I want to be your boyfriend, he said simply. Isabella, will you accept this blind man as yours? Her breath caught. Was he serious? She searched his face, her heart pounding so violently she was sure he could hear it. But what if I'm ugly, sir? The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Will you still treat me the same way once you see my face? She needed reassurance. If they were truly meant to be, it wouldn't matter. He exhaled softly, as if the answer was obvious. You accepted me as I am now, didn't you? I'm blind. Who am I not to accept you? I don't even know what you look like, and yet I'm already in love with your personality. His fingers brushed against hers. I love that you've stayed by my side despite all my moods. Her pulse thrummed in her ears. What's your decision, Isabella? He asked, his voice steady but expectant. I want your answer right now. Right now? She echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. That's so soon. Why wait? He countered. If you feel the same, you'll accept me. If not, reject me. It's simple. His lips curved into a faint smile. If you say yes, I'll be your first boyfriend. She drew in a shaky breath. That would make you my first, she murmured, the reality of it settling in. Julian nodded as if he had already made peace with that fact. That's good. He tilted his head slightly. Now, tell me, do you want me to be your boyfriend? A pause. Kiss me if your answer is yes. If not, remove your hand from my face. Her thoughts blurred. Who in their right mind would reject Julian Santiago? From the start, she had been drawn to him. At first, it was purely his striking looks, but over time, she had come to know the man beyond his sharp features. His calm demeanor, his unexpected moments of warmth, and even his rare flashes of shyness made him utterly irresistible. Why would she ever say no? Taking a steadying breath, she leaned in. Her fingers lifted from his cheek, but only so she could press her lips against his. A soft, surprised sound escaped him before he responded, kissing her back. His lips were warm, tentative at first, then firmer as she placed a hand on his shoulder to steady herself. When she finally pulled away, she found him still frozen, his unseeing eyes wide with surprise. She smiled. "I love you, sir," she whispered. "So, I guess that means you're my boyfriend now." 2 weeks had passed since Isabella became Julian's girlfriend. He had wanted to announce their relationship immediately, but she insisted on keeping it from the other staff. For now. "Are you planning to hide me forever?" he grumbled one morning as she straightened his tie. "I'm not some secret boyfriend, Isabella. I'm not hiding you," she soothed, smoothing the fabric of his collar. "Maybe we can tell everyone after we've been together for a month." His lips pressed into a thin line. "A whole month? Besides," she added, adjusting the tie knot, "it's not like you're a secret. Look, we're even going on a public date today." He still looked unconvinced. "You must be embarrassed of me." She shook her head with a small laugh. "I told you, I'm not." Reaching for his hairbrush, she gently ran it through his locks, her fingers lingering at the ends. "Now, call me something else," she said suddenly. "Not Mom, and not Isabella either. I want a pet name." "I want you to call me Babe," he declared. She wrinkled her nose. "That's so common. Men call their side chicks Babe all the time. Pick something else, like Love, Honey, or even, well, maybe Sweetheart." His low chuckle sent a shiver down her spine. "Fine then, you come up with something." She pouted. "How about you call me Honey?" "That's still a bit standard, but let's go with it." "All right, honey," Julian replied smoothly, letting her take his arm as they stepped out of the house. Their fingers brushed before intertwining, a small but intimate gesture that did not go unnoticed. The staff exchanged curious glances, whispering among themselves as the two walked past, but neither Isabella nor Julian paid them any mind. Tonight was theirs. The restaurant Julian had booked was as exclusive as it was elegant. Dim lighting, soft music, and a near-empty space granted them a rare sense of privacy. The few other diners present remained absorbed in their own conversations. As they settled at their table, Julian turned toward her. "Is this your first time dining somewhere like this?" Isabella instinctively bit her lip before answering. "Yeah." A harmless lie. She didn't want to risk explaining that she had been to such places before. It was easier for him to believe she was just an ordinary maid experiencing luxury for the first time. Julian smiled. "Then I'm glad to be the first to bring you here." She hesitated before speaking again. "Julian, can we take a photo?" His brow lifted slightly. "A photo?" "On your phone," she clarified. "That way, when your eyesight is back, you can see my face." At those words, his expression shifted, his smile faltering. "Why are you saying that?" His voice was sharper now, more guarded. "Are you planning to leave me?" Her eyes widened. "What? No, I just..." Shaking her head, she quickly grabbed his phone, turning on the camera before snapping a few selfies of them together. "See?" she said gently. "Now you'll have a bunch of pictures of us." Some of the tension in his shoulders eased. He nodded, though he still seemed deep in thought. As their meal arrived, Isabella took it upon herself to help him now and then, lifting small bites to his lips. Each time she did, the tips of his ears burned red. "Don't be shy," she teased, stifling a laugh. "There's nothing wrong with letting me feed you. Men do the same for women." He huffed in mild protest. "When I can see again, I'll feed you," he shot back. "Then we'll go see movies together." Isabella grinned. "Yes, we definitely will. It's only a couple of weeks until your operation, right?" Excitement buzzed between them as they finished their meal, but just as they stood to leave, a sudden presence caught Isabella's attention. A woman was approaching. Her eyes locked onto Julian with a stunned expression, as if she had just seen a ghost. "Oh my God, Julian," she gasped, a brilliant smile breaking across her face. "You can see again." But just as quickly as her delight surfaced, it vanished. The moment Julian turned toward the sound of her voice and made no visual recognition of her presence, realization dawned. He was still blind. And her smile faded.
"Why are you here, Megan?" Julian's voice was cold, devoid of warmth. The woman in front of them scoffed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. I can't believe this. You actually got yourself a new girlfriend, even while you're still blind? And her, please? Her gaze flicked to Isabella, scanning her from head to toe with barely concealed disdain. So, you're his new fling? Megan sneered, her voice dripping with malice. Did you bring him here? Isabella squared her shoulders, standing firm. Girlfriend, actually, she corrected, holding her head high. Megan's eyes widened as if she found the idea too absurd to believe. You? She let out a derisive laugh. His girlfriend? What are you even doing with him? Nobody wants a blind man, right? You must be after his money. The sharp crack of Isabella's palm connecting with Megan's cheek echoed through the restaurant. Gasps filled the air. Conversations halted. Megan stumbled back, clutching her stinging cheek. What the? She sputtered. Did you just slap me? Isabella's eyes blazed with fury. To wake you up. Megan's jaw dropped. If you truly cared about your ex, you wouldn't have abandoned him in the first place. And honestly, Isabella's lips curled into a smirk. I'm glad you left, because you don't deserve him. Megan looked momentarily stunned, but Isabella wasn't finished. Leaving someone just because they lost their sight? That's the shallowest thing I've ever heard. And FYI, my boyfriend, Julian, we'll see again in 2 weeks. And when he opens his eyes, guess who he'll be looking at? She leaned in slightly, her voice unwavering. Me, not you. You? You're nothing but his past. Without sparing Megan another glance, Isabella slipped her hand under Julian's elbow and guided him toward the exit. They walked out with their heads high, leaving Megan fuming in the middle of the restaurant. The car ride home was quiet. Too quiet. Julian hadn't said a word since they left, and with each passing moment, unease crept into Isabella's heart. She clenched her hands together, her thoughts racing. Does he still have feelings for her? Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. You still love her, don't you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Julian didn't hesitate. No? You're sure? She pressed, afraid of the answer. He turned toward her, reaching out. She hesitated only a second before placing her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, squeezing gently. Yes, he murmured. She exhaled, her chest tightening with something that felt dangerously close to relief. Thank you, she blinked. For what? For defending me, he murmured, his voice soft yet full of emotion. Isabella let out an awkward, apologetic laugh. Sorry if that was overkill. She was so rude. I couldn't stand her implying I was just after your money, which I'm not, by the way. I know, Julian reassured her. Let's not talk about her anymore. Then, he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss against her knuckles. I'm happy, Isabella. Her heart melted. She beamed, feeling warmth spread through her chest. At our next date, you'll be able to see me. She leaned over and hugged him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. Gratitude swelled inside her. She had truly fallen for him. She only hoped their happiness would last. But trouble found them sooner than she expected. While grocery shopping at the mall a few days later, Isabella felt her body tense. A familiar figure loomed in the distance. Alexander. He wasn't alone. Several men surrounded him like shadows, his presence unmistakable amidst the crowd. Panic seized her. Her breath caught in her throat. She swallowed hard and forced herself to stay calm. Stay calm, stay calm. Sweetheart, she said suddenly, keeping her voice steady. Can you wait here on this bench for a moment? Julian turned his head toward her, his brow furrowing slightly. Why? What's wrong? She brushed a hand gently across his cheek, forcing a smile. I just forgot something. I'll be right back, okay? After a pause, he nodded. Okay. He smiled faintly, though she could tell he was puzzled. He squeezed his hand one last time before letting go, turning away quickly. Her heart pounded as she glanced toward Alexander again. He had seen her. A slow, smug smirk spread across his face. His arms crossed as he arched a brow. He was waiting. Her legs trembled, but she forced herself forward. She had run from him for months. Now she had no choice but to face him. The moment she reached him, his arms slung around her shoulders like a vice. There you are, his voice dripped with mocking triumph. Took us long enough to find you. His grip was suffocating. So this is where you've been hiding, with that blind man, huh? His tone was laced with derision. Isabella wrenched herself free, shoving his arm off. "Don't touch me!" She met his gaze with defiance. "I'm not coming with you, Alexander. I won't marry you." His expression darkened. His eyes narrowed, his smile disappearing. "You're testing my patience, Isabella." His voice was low, dangerous. "We've been searching for you for months, and now that I've found you, you're coming with me, whether you like it or not." She glared at him. "I won't marry you. That's why I ran away." Her voice shook, but she stood her ground. "I'll even give up my inheritance, if that's what it takes. Anything but marrying you." Alexander let out a cold, bitter laugh. Then, without warning, his hand shot out. He grabbed her wrist and yanked her forward. "No!" Isabella gasped, stumbling as he dragged her toward the nearby restroom. Before she could resist, he forced her inside the women's bathroom. A shriek tore from her throat. The heavy door slammed shut behind them. The moment Alexander stormed into the restroom, the few women inside froze. "Everybody out," he barked. Panic surged through the room. One woman fled so fast she didn't even finish fastening her pants. Within seconds, Isabella was alone with him. The door slammed shut. Before she could react, Alexander seized her and shoved her against the cold tiled wall. Pain jolted through her spine. A hiss of breath left her lips. His arm braced against the wall beside her, trapping her. His other hand jabbed a finger dangerously close to her face. Her pulse pounded in alarm. "You have no idea what I'm capable of," he growled, his jaw clenched. "I've put up with so much. I searched for you for months, and now you—" His voice dripped with venom as he leaned in closer. "Are telling me you won't come back?" His eyes darkened. "Say goodbye to that blind man, Isabella. Otherwise he won't stay safe much longer." Her breath hitched. Fear clawed at her chest. Then, his grip tightened on her chin, forcing her to look at him. A slow, malicious grin spread across his face. "Did you ever wonder who caused that man's blindness?" he sneered. Dread crawled up her spine. He pointed to himself. "Me!" Her heart stopped. "I'm the reason Julian can't see." A choked gasp left her lips. Her vision blurred with tears. "You monster!" she spat, fury and devastation colliding inside her. She swung her hand to slap him. But he caught her wrist midair, squeezing it painfully. "You're a criminal, Alexander," she shouted, her voice shaking. He only laughed, cold, merciless. "That idiot even hired people to hunt me down, but no one's pinned me yet." His voice lowered, turning menacing. "And I'll do far worse if you don't obey." Then he twisted a fistful of her hair, yanking her head back. She winced, biting back a cry as his breath ghosted over her ear. "Go tell him goodbye," he murmured darkly. "Then come back to me tomorrow, or I'll make sure your loved ones pay the price, starting with that effing blind man." Then, with a shove, he let her go. Isabella stumbled forward, barely catching herself on the sink. Tears streamed down her cheeks, her entire body trembling. Alexander was the one who blinded Julian. What a cruel, twisted fate. She wiped at her tears, forcing herself to breathe. "Stay calm, stay strong." Then, straightening herself, she walked out of the restroom. She spotted Julian still sitting patiently on the bench, his face turning toward her the second she neared. Worry was etched in his features. Her chest ached. She forced a smile, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Sweetheart," she murmured, hurrying over. "I'm so sorry for taking so long. The line was too long at the counter." She hoped he wouldn't hear the tremor in her voice. She had to protect him, no matter what. "It's fine," Julian said gently. "Shall we go home now?" Isabella hesitated, her fingers tightening around his arm. "Can we have a date here first?" she asked quickly, her voice soft but urgent. Her eyes glistened, holding back emotions she couldn't name. He blinked in surprise. "I thought you wanted to wait until my eyesight came back." She chewed her lip, willing herself to smile. "We're already at the mall. It would be a shame not to do something fun," she reasoned, though the weight in her chest made it hard to breathe. Her throat tightened, but she forced a light tone. "Let's go on a date, Julian, just this once." A long pause. Then, with a sigh, he relented. "All right, honey, let's have a date right now." Relief flooded through her. She squeezed his arm gratefully, guiding him forward as the driver took their groceries to the car. She held on to Julian like a lifeline, looping her arm through his as they walked through the mall. "We can't really admire the pretty places here," she murmured, "so let's do something you can hear, like karaoke." He arched a brow, amused. "Karaoke!" She pressed closer, as if that alone could shield her from the storm looming over her heart. "Yes, you can listen to me sing, though I'm not sure if I'm any good. But I'll sing for you anyway." A chuckle rumbled from his chest. "Well, I won't be able to judge your performance, so that's lucky for you." She giggled, tugging him toward the karaoke booths. Tonight, she resolved to make the most of every moment. Because tomorrow, she would have to leave him. She'd find a way to stop the wedding eventually, but if she failed, she might never return to Julian. At the very least, she wanted to give him memories to hold on to. To hold on to her. Later that night, back at the house, Isabella gave herself to Julian completely. For the first time, she silenced all her fears, all her doubts, surrendering to the man she loved. His hands traced over her skin, learning her by touch alone, and though he couldn't see her, his every movement was careful, devoted. She clung to him, breath hitching as they moved together, as if she could somehow imprint herself onto him forever. When it was over, they lay entwined, their heartbeats gradually slowing, breath mingling in the dim light. Isabella let out a contented sigh, nuzzling against his shoulder. "You were amazing." Her cheeks burned at her own boldness, but she didn't regret a thing. Julian's arms tightened around her. "You gave me your virginity," he murmured. "Aren't you happy that I was your first?" She poked his chest playfully. "You almost sound like you're disappointed." He shook his head, a faint smile in his voice. "That's not it. I'm happy, I just wish—" He exhaled. "I wish it had been more memorable for you. That I could have seen you tonight." She pressed a hand over his heart. "You will see me, Julian," she whispered. "Soon." Even if it might not be true, she needed him to believe it, because she needed to believe it too. She cupped his cheek, her thumb grazing over his skin. "It's already memorable, Julian. Trust me." Then she kissed him softly, lingering longer than usual, as if trying to etch the feel of his lips against hers into her memory. Guilt gnawed at her. She had to leave. This might be the last time they'd share something so intimate, especially with Alexander's threat hanging over her like a dark cloud. At least Julian's operation was tomorrow soon. He'd regain his eyesight, and maybe, just maybe, he'd uncover the truth about everything. That night, after Alexander left, Isabella sat at the desk in Julian's room, staring at a blank sheet of paper. Her hands trembled as she picked up the pen. Then, slowly, she wrote everything down. Alexander's full name, how he had caused the accident that stole Julian's sight, every horrifying truth she knew. She folded the note carefully and slipped it inside one of Julian's favorite books, tucking it between well-worn pages she knew he loved. Tears welled in her eyes as she traced the book's spine with her fingertips. "I'm so," she whispered. She turned off the light and left the room, her heart breaking with every step. The next morning, Julian was climbing into the car, preparing to leave for the hospital. Isabella stood by the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, fighting to keep her composure. He leaned out the window, brows knit in concern. "Aren't you coming along?" he asked. "I'd like to see you as soon as I can open my eyes again." Her throat tightened. She forced a small smile. "I'll just stay here, Julian. If you really want me to be the first person you see, call me when you're awake." Her voice wavered, the effort to hold herself together nearly unbearable. He frowned, sensing the sadness in her tone. "All right. Good luck to me, I guess," he murmured with a weak chuckle. Then, as if the words had been sitting on the edge of his tongue, he exhaled shakily and added, "Once I can see, I can't wait to show you that I—" He hesitated, then finally said it. "I love you." The words hung in the air, startling even Miss Olivia, who had just arrived and stood frozen in place. Isabella's breath hitched. Her heart screamed to tell him she loved him too. But instead, all she managed was a strangled, "Oh, okay, bye." She waved stiffly as the car pulled away, her vision blurring with unshed tears. When she turned back, Miss Olivia was staring at her in utter shock. Isabella exhaled slowly, forcing herself to steady her voice. "Ma'am, I'm heading out. I need to buy something," she said hastily. Miss Olivia blinked, still too stunned by Julian's unexpected confession to respond properly. She only managed a small nod, and just like that, Isabella left the house. She had arrived with nothing. Now she was leaving the same way. As she walked away, her heart ached with every step. She could only pray that once Julian regained his sight, he would find the note she had left him. Maybe then he would understand. Maybe then he could protect himself from Alexander. She stepped outside to find Alexander already waiting, leaning against his sleek car with an air of triumph. The moment she slid into the passenger seat, he smirked. "Good choice, Isabella. This is the right decision." She stared blankly out the window, refusing to acknowledge him. Alexander's grin widened. "So, did you say goodbye to that blind man?" His voice dripped with mock sympathy. "Poor guy, probably crying again because yet another woman abandoned him." Isabella clenched her fists. "Just shut up," she muttered. "Your breath stinks." The smirk vanished from his lips. "What did you just say?" Before she could react, his hand shot out, grabbing her by the collar. Her pulse spiked in alarm, but she shoved him off with a glare. Alexander let out a sharp bark of laughter. "Don't act so tough, Isabella." His voice darkened. "Once we're married, you'll have nowhere to run. If you piss me off, I'll make your life miserable." The car pulled up to her family's grand estate, a place that once felt like home but now felt like a prison. The second Isabella stepped out, her mother, Mrs. Alara, rushed toward her, arms open wide. "Welcome back, sweetheart." The embrace felt suffocating rather than comforting. Her younger sister, Marianne, dashed forward, wrapping her arms around Isabella's waist. But no warmth bloomed in Isabella's chest. No relief. Alexander stood nearby, watching with smug satisfaction. Her mother pulled back, searching her face. "Where have you been? We looked everywhere." Isabella straightened, her voice steady but cold. "I ran away," she said bluntly. "I don't want to marry Alexander. You forced me." The smile faded from her mother's lips. Her father, who had just stepped into view, exchanged a heavy look with his wife. A silent conversation passed between them. One Isabella had seen before. Guilt, regret, but no intention to stop what was already set in motion. Alexander stepped forward, his voice smooth but edged with impatience. "Talk to her properly, Mrs. Alara. I'd rather not wait long. The wedding should happen soon if you want your company to be rescued." With that final warning, he turned on his heel, his men trailing behind him as they exited. The moment the door shut, Isabella felt her mother's trembling fingers close around her hand. "Sweetheart, we're drowning in debt. The company is sinking. We have no choice." Isabella's throat tightened. She jerked her hand free. "And that's because Dad gambled everything away, isn't it?" she bit out. "Why do I have to pay for his mistakes? I won't marry Alexander." A cold, authoritative voice cut through the room. "You have no say in the matter." Isabella stiffened. Her father, Mr. Ilara, stepped into view, his expression as rigid as stone. "We gave you everything, Isabella. Now it's your turn to repay us." The words struck like a slap. Her pulse pounded as she forced herself to speak. "I heard Alexander was the reason Julian went blind. He's a criminal." Her father's eyes darkened. "Enough." His voice was sharp, unwavering. "I don't care what he is. If you don't marry him, your sister suffers too. Do you want her future destroyed?" Isabella's gaze darted to Marianne. Her little sister, only 10, stood nearby, staring up at her with wide, innocent eyes. She didn't understand what was happening. Isabella's heart twisted painfully. She hadn't realized just how dire their situation was. She should have seen the signs, should have done something, anything, other than run. Now there was no way out. The wedding preparations moved swiftly, too swiftly. The dreaded day arrived. Isabella stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, staring at her reflection in the white gown. She barely recognized herself. Her hands trembled as she smoothed the fabric, her mind racing. Julian? Had he regained his sight yet? Had he read her note? Was he angry, hurt? Tears burned the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had to stay strong. Alexander's family had insisted on a small private wedding, probably to keep the truth hidden from society. Isabella suspected there was more to it, though. Something told her Alexander wouldn't let her stay here for long. He would take her away somewhere far. Somewhere Julian wouldn't be able to find her. Isabella was ushered into a sleek white car, her hands trembling as they rested on her lap. The entire drive to Sanctuary Hall felt surreal, like a slow march toward her own execution. The way he smiled, the way he held her, the way he whispered her name like it was something sacred. At least she had known love, real love, even if only for a fleeting moment. That was something Alexander could never take away from her. The grand double doors of Sanctuary Hall loomed ahead. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside, each step down the aisle feeling heavier than the last. And there he was. Alexander stood at the altar, his smug grin stretching wider the closer she got. As she reached his side, he leaned in, his voice a low, mocking murmur. "I expected you to cry." Isabella tilted her chin up, forcing a smirk despite the bile rising in her throat. "Why would I cry?" she shot back coolly. "Sure, I'm marrying you, but you'll never get what you wanted most." His smile faltered. "You were desperate for my virginity, weren't you?" she continued, voice razor sharp. "Too bad, I gave it away. To the man you blinded." Alexander's nostrils flared, his fingers dug into her wrist, his grip like iron. "What did you just say?" he hissed. Pain shot up her arm, but she refused to flinch. "It's too late for you, Alexander." His jaw clenched, his voice quaking with fury. "You're going to regret that." The officiant cleared his throat, beginning the ceremony. "Let us start the wedding. Stop this damn wedding!" The furious voice cut through the air, echoing across the vast hall. Gasps rippled through the room. All heads whipped toward the entrance. Isabella turned sharply, her breath caught in her throat. A tall figure stood in the doorway, his presence commanding, unmistakable. Her heart stuttered. Julian, he could see, his gaze once soft and searching was now sharp as a blade, and it was locked on Alexander with seething fury. "What the hell?" Alexander started, but before he could finish, Julian was already 2 steps ahead. He pulled out a gun with the precision of someone who had planned this moment down to the last detail. The cold metal was aimed directly at Alexander's head. Screams erupted from the guests, a mix of shock and fear. The priest took a terrified step back, eyes wide with disbelief. Isabella's heart pounded in her chest. Julian could see. He could see tears of joy slip down her cheeks, mingling with the terror of the moment. Alexander, now panicked, instinctively reached for his own weapon. The air was thick with tension. Outside, the sound of sirens wailed. Police cars. Help was near. But Alexander wasn't done. In a desperate bid for control, he raised his gun and fired a shot into the air. The deafening crack sent everyone scrambling for cover. Before Alexander could reach Isabella, Julian reacted instantly, firing with unwavering accuracy. The bullet struck Alexander in the leg, and he collapsed to the floor, howling in agony, clutching his wound. His men, caught off guard by the arrival of the police, were swiftly apprehended. "Julian," Isabella whispered, her voice trembling as tears streamed down her face. He reached out, extending a hand toward her. His eyes, once full of uncertainty, now burned with raw emotion. "Come with me," he said softly, his voice thick with all the things he couldn't say. Without thinking, Isabella started to run toward him, toward safety. But then a sharp, distinct crack of a gunshot shattered her world. The bullet struck her back before she could even react. Time seemed to slow. Her legs gave way, and for a heartbeat she fell forward. She collapsed into Julian's arms, her vision blurring, her body growing weak. "Isabella!" Julian cried out, his voice cracking with fear and helplessness. Everything around her went white. Isabella's mind was a fog, drifting between consciousness and a strange, empty space. Was she in heaven? She blinked, but everything was blurry. Her vision began to clear slowly. "She's awake!" a voice rang out. A face appeared before her, full of worry and relief. It was her mother, her eyes swollen from crying. "Isabella! Oh, thank goodness!" her mother gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks. Her mother enveloped her in a tight, trembling hug. Isabella could feel the warm shake of her mother's sobs against her own chest. "I'm sorry. We're so sorry," Mrs. Ilara cried, her voice thick with regret. "Unconscious for a week," Isabella whispered, her voice hoarse. The words seemed foreign in her ears. "A week?" she repeated, her eyes widening in disbelief. It felt like just moments ago that everything had fallen apart, but at least she was alive. "Mom!" Isabella's voice was shaky as she tried to process everything. Her mother gave a shaky smile. "Are you hungry, sweetheart? Tell me what you want." Isabella's heart fluttered at the gentleness in her mother's voice, but one thought overwhelmed her. "Where's Julian?" she asked urgently, the question slipping out before she could stop herself. Her mother paused, looking slightly surprised. "Julian? Oh, that gentleman who crashed your wedding?" she replied, her tone a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "He's speaking with your father. Don't worry, he's fine, and thanks to him we learned Alexander was behind the downfall of our company, and so many other crimes. Now Alexander's in jail, and his family sold everything in disgrace." A deep breath of relief escaped Isabella's chest as the weight on her heart began to lift. She closed her eyes for a moment, grateful that everything was finally over. She settled back against the hospital pillows, her thoughts drifting back to Julian. Had he been right all along? The question lingered in her mind, but she yearned more than anything to see him. See the man who had risked everything for her. That evening, as the soft light of dusk bathed the hospital room, Isabella gazed out the window. Her mother and sister were fast asleep, huddled together on the bed, ironically leaving her, the patient, standing by the IV pole, as if everything had returned to normal. She was just about to sit down in a nearby chair when there was a soft knock on the door. Isabella shuffled toward the door, her IV stand clinking softly as she moved. She opened it with a quiet sigh, only to be greeted by an enormous bouquet of fresh red roses. The flowers were so large she couldn't see the person holding them. The bouquet was lowered slowly, revealing Julian's face. Isabella's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, she almost went weak in the knees. "I'm so happy I can finally see you again, honey," Julian said with a warmth that melted her heart. Tears welled up in Isabella's eyes as she flung her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder. "Julian," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry, I only left you because I know—" He cut her off gently, pressing a finger to her lips. When she drew back, he gazed at her with such tenderness that it made her feel like everything in the world had paused. "I'm not mad, honey," he reassured her softly. "I'm just so grateful you survived. And now I can see your eyes. They're so beautiful." With a smile, he handed her the flowers and stepped into the hospital room, his presence filling the space with a sense of calm she had longed for. He held her close, drawing her into him by the waist. "These eyes," he murmured, his voice low and affectionate. "I owe them to the doctor, sure, but they're here so I can look at you. And now we can do everything you wanted with my new vision." He cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing over her skin tenderly. "I can finally kiss you properly," he whispered, his gaze flickering to her lips. Isabella's breath caught in her throat as she nodded, unable to contain the flutter of excitement in her chest. "Yes, Julian," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. He leaned in, capturing her lips in a kiss that was filled with all the love and longing they had both felt during their time apart. They clung to each other, lost in the moment, ignoring everything around them. But a discreet throat clearing made Isabella jump in surprise. She quickly pulled away, her face flushing with embarrassment. Turning, she saw her father standing in the doorway, holding a small cake in his hands. An unexpected but welcome interruption. "Dad?" Isabella stammered, her cheeks burning with a mix of embarrassment and affection. "You can save that for later, you two," he teased with a playful smirk. He made his way over, holding a small cake with one hand and a mischievous grin. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." Isabella blinked, surprised. Before she could process what was happening, a burst of party poppers went off, filling the room with colorful confetti. Her mother and sister, now awake, beamed as they began singing "Happy Birthday" in joyful chorus. Isabella's heart fluttered as the realization dawned on her. It was her birthday. She hadn't even remembered amidst the chaos of everything that had happened. She turned toward Julian, her eyes brimming with gratitude and love. "Happy birthday, honey," Julian said softly, stepping closer to her. Before she could react, he slowly sank down on one knee. Her pulse raced, every beat feeling louder than the last as she stared at him in utter shock, then shifted her gaze to her family. Her mother and sister were beaming, their faces radiating with happiness and excitement. What is going on?" Isabella's voice quivered in disbelief. Julian smiled, his expression filled with sincerity and love as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "I know it's only been a short time since we met," he began, his voice low and earnest. "But from the moment I regained my sight, I realized how much I needed you. When I found out you were gone and learned about your forced wedding, my world went dark again. But now, all I can think of is how I never want to lose you." He opened the box, revealing a sparkling ring, its brilliance almost as bright as the love shining in his eyes. "So, here I am, on my knees, asking you, will you marry me? Will you be my personal driver, my personal maid, my everything?" Tears of joy welled in Isabella's eyes as her heart soared. Her lips curved into the brightest smile Julian had ever seen, and without hesitation, she threw her arms around him. "Yes, yes," she cried, laughter and tears mixing together as she jumped up and down in sheer joy. "I love you so much." Julian gently took her left hand, his fingers brushing against hers as he slid the ring onto her finger. With a smile that melted her heart, he pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground in a tender, passionate embrace. "I love you," he murmured, his voice full of emotion. "Thank you for accepting me, even when I couldn't see. Now that I finally can, let's make a million more memories together with these new eyes." With the entire room watching, he leaned in and kissed her deeply, a kiss filled with promises and dreams of the future. Isabella didn't hesitate for a second. She kissed him back, pouring all her love and gratitude into the moment. In that kiss, she knew they had finally found the happy ending they both deserved. Love that truly endures is never based on outward appearances or convenience. It's a choice, one that stays, one that serves, one that believes in the best of the other person, even through all the hardships. When we truly care for someone, we protect them, we support them, and we choose to see past their flaws, helping them grow and become the best version of themselves. What a journey Isabella and Julian have been through. Their love is a testament to the power of persistence, belief, and the strength to fight for what's right. Despite the challenges, they found a way to be together, showing us that true love isn't about perfection, but about choosing to stay, grow, and support each other through it all. So, what did you think of their story? Do you believe love can truly overcome such hardships? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories like this one. Until next time, keep believing in love and never give up on what truly matters.